On Christmas night, the city was quiet, frozen under falling snow. A mother and her young son sat on the curb, nowhere left to go, hiding from a life they had just escaped.
John,
Then a biker stopped.
we have a
big man,
shelter just around the
leather
corner.
jacket worn thin,
If you need a place
a
to stay
scarred
warm.
Harley, a silent German shepherd at his side. He didn't ask questions. He didn't promise miracles. But when the child looked up and whispered, "Can you tell Santa where we moved?" Everything changed.
You need to sign here by
because
Friday.
what followed
I
wasn't just
understand,
kindness.
but we need more
It was a
time to
lie
vacate
that
the
turned
premises.
Go
loud,
outside
a
and
false
all of us
accusation,
together.
It
and a
really
truth
is.
strong
I
enough
wouldn't
to
trade this for
survive it.
anything.
The city had dressed itself for Christmas, but it did not feel kind. Snow fell steadily, not in soft flakes meant for postcards, but in fine, sharp grains that stung the skin and filled the air with a dry, biting cold. The streets of the small Midwestern city were lined with old brick buildings and narrow storefronts, their windows glowing with yellow lights and paper snowflakes taped inside. Strings of Christmas bulbs hung from lampposts, blinking red and green, reflecting off the icy pavement. The decorations promised warmth, but the wind tore through the avenues without mercy, slipping between coats, crawling down collars, and finding every place where fabric had worn thin. It was the kind of cold that did not rush you. It waited you out. Traffic was light. Most families were already indoors, gathered around tables or televisions, sharing food and familiar stories. From inside the houses came muffled music and laughter, distorted by walls and glass. Outside, the city felt hollow, like a stage after the audience had gone home. Snowplows had already passed once, leaving narrow gray paths along the road, but the sidewalks were uneven, slick with slush and frozen footprints. On Maple Street, where the streetlights flickered more than they shone, two figures sat close together near the curb, half hidden by a closed bus stop shelter. Sarah Bennett held her son tightly, her arms wrapped around him as if she could hold the cold back by force. She was 31 years old, though the lines around her eyes and mouth suggested more. Her brown hair, usually pulled into a neat ponytail for work, had slipped loose beneath a knitted hat, strands sticking to her cheeks where melted snow had dampened her skin. She wore a winter coat that had once been warm but had grown thin with years of use. The zipper slightly bent near the collar. A small backpack rested against her side, its fabric faded, one strap repaired with uneven stitching. Inside were a few clothes, a toothbrush, and paperwork she had grabbed without looking. It was all she had taken when she left. Noah, her 6-year-old son, leaned into her chest, his knees pulled up, his boots dangling just above the icy ground. He was small for his age, with dark hair that curled at the ends and wide eyes that took in more than Sarah wished they would. He wore a puffy jacket that had belonged to another child before him, and gloves that were too big, the fingers folding over themselves. A stuffed dog, missing one eye, was tucked under his arm. He did not cry. That worried Sarah more than anything else. They had not planned to stop there. Sarah had not planned anything at all beyond leaving. The apartment door had closed behind them earlier that evening, with a soft sound that felt louder than it should have. She had waited until the hallway was quiet, until the television in the next unit was turned up, until the familiar tension in her chest told her that if she stayed another minute, she would lose the nerve to go. She had taken Noah's hand, whispered that they were going for a walk, and stepped into the cold. Now, sitting on the curb, she realized how far courage could take you and where it stopped. "Mom?" Noah's voice was small, careful, like he was afraid of breaking something. "Are we going to Grandma's?" Sarah swallowed. Her mother had passed away years ago, a fact no one knew, but sometimes children ask questions because they needed the comfort of the answer, not the truth itself. Sarah tightened her arms around him and shook her head slightly. "Not tonight, buddy." "Are we moving?" he asked. He looked up at her, searching her face. "You said moving means new places." The word caught in her throat. She did not want to lie, but she did not know how to tell the truth without letting fear spill out. She brushed a thumb across his cheek, wiping away a wet snowflake. "We're just taking a break," she said. "Just for tonight." Noah nodded slowly, as if filing the information away for later. He looked down the street at the blinking lights, then back up at her. "Will Santa know where we are?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she forced a small smile. "Santa's very good at finding people," she said. The words sounded thin even to her, but Noah seemed to accept them. He rested his head against her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. Sarah stared across the street at a bakery that had closed hours earlier. A wreath hung crookedly on its door, and a sign in the window promised holiday pies. She wondered how many times she had walked past places like that, thinking she would come back when things were better. She thought about the apartment they had left behind, the quiet rooms that had never truly felt safe, the way she had learned to listen for changes in tone, in footsteps, in silence. She did not think about the man himself. She did not need to. The decision to leave had been made in small pieces over a long time, and tonight those pieces had finally added up. A gust of wind blew snow into the bus stop shelter, swirling it around their feet. Noah shivered. Sarah adjusted her coat, pulling it tighter around him. She checked her phone, the screen dim and cracked, the battery warning flashing red. No missed calls, no messages. She did not know who she would have called if there were. The city had resources, she knew that, but they all required mornings, offices, forms. Tonight, all she needed was a place where Noah could sleep without waking up afraid. The sound reached them before the sight of it, a low, steady rumble, deep and familiar, cutting through the quiet street. Sarah looked up as a motorcycle came into view at the far end of Maple Street, its headlight casting a pale sonic through the falling snow. The bike moved slowly, carefully, tires crunching over frozen slush. As it drew closer, she saw that it was old, its black paint dulled by time, the chrome marked with scratches that told a long story of roads traveled and not repaired. The rider wore a black leather jacket that had seen better years, the sleeves creased and worn at the elbows, small tears near the seams mended with heavy thread. Beneath it, she could see the edge of a work shirt, dark and stained from labor. He wore heavy boots and jeans that were faded and frayed at the cuffs. His build was large, solid, the kind of strength that came from use rather than show. When he slowed, she noticed his beard first, thick, dark with streaks of gray, framing a face that was serious without being hard. His head was shaved close, but a small section of hair was tied back at the nape of his neck. Tattoos covered his hands and crept up his wrists, simple lines and shapes, worn smooth with age. The motorcycle rolled to a stop several yards away, idling softly. Beside the man, perched confidently on the bike's rear frame, was a large dog. The dog was a German Shepherd mix, black and tan, with alert ears and calm, steady eyes. He sat as if he belonged there, balanced and patient, his breath puffing white in the cold. The man rested one gloved hand on the handlebar and the other briefly on the dog's back. Jack Miller had not planned to stop. He had been heading back to the garage behind the small repair shop where he worked and lived, thinking about the long day he had just finished and the longer winter ahead. Christmas had never meant much to him after the service and the years that followed, but he still noticed the quiet on nights like this. Duke, the dog, noticed other things. Jack felt the shift in the bike before he saw them. The way Duke's body had gone still, his attention fixed ahead. Jack cut the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. Snow continued to fall between them. Jack did not approach right away. He stayed where he was, giving space, his posture relaxed but alert. He had learned long ago that how you showed up mattered. Duke jumped down from the bike with an easy motion and walked a few steps forward, stopping at a respectful distance. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply stood, tail low, ears forward, watching Sarah and Noah with quiet interest. Noah lifted his head, his eyes widening slightly. He shifted closer to Sarah but did not pull away. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, though she was not sure if she meant it for Noah or herself. Jack spoke, his voice low and even. "Cold night," he said. It was not a question. Sarah nodded. She did not move. "Yeah." Jack glanced at the bus stop sign, the empty street, the way Sarah held her son as if she were bracing against more than the weather. He took a step back instead of forward, making his intentions clear. "You need a phone?" he asked. "Or directions?" Sarah hesitated. She did not trust easily. She had learned the cost of that. But the way he stood, the way the dog waited, the lack of pressure in his voice, it all added up to something that felt safe. "Enough for now." "We're just resting," she said. "We'll move soon." Jack nodded as if that made sense. "All right." He paused, then added, "Name's Jack. This is Duke." At the sound of his name, Duke's tail gave a single slow wag. Noah watched him closely, curiosity edging out fear. "He's big," Noah said. Jack allowed the corner of his mouth to lift slightly. "Yeah, he is." He crouched down a bit, resting his weight on his heels, keeping his hands visible. "He's gentle, though." Duke took that as permission and lowered himself to the ground, sitting calmly. Noah shifted again, then carefully reached out one gloved hand. Duke leaned forward just enough for Noah to touch the top of his head. The boy's shoulders relaxed. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. She did not know this man. She did not know what would come next. But for the first time that night, she felt the edge of panic pull back. Just a little. Snow continued to fall, the lights blinked overhead, and the city held its breath, waiting. Jack straightened slowly. He looked from Sarah to Noah and back again. "If you change your mind," he said, nodding toward the bike and the dark street beyond, "I'm around." Sarah met his eyes. They were steady, tired, and kind, in a way that did not ask for anything in return. She nodded. "Thank you," she said. She did not know yet how much that moment would matter. For now, it was enough that someone had stopped. The engine did not start again. Jack stayed where he was, Duke at his side, the three of them sharing the cold night as Christmas lights flickered above Maple Street. The snow did not stop when Jack finally moved. It fell with the same steady patience it had all night, coating the street in a dull white layer that softened edges without making anything easier. Jack glanced once more down Maple Street, then back at Sarah and Noah. The bus shelter offered little protection, and the wind had begun to snake its way through the gaps again. He did not ask them to follow him. He simply nodded toward the motorcycle and spoke as if stating a fact. "I've got a place not far," he said. "It's not much, but it's dry and warm." Sarah tightened her grip on Noah. Her first instinct was to refuse. Years of carefully measured distance did not disappear in one kind moment. She studied Jack's face again, looking for signs she had learned to recognize. Impatience, expectation, something hidden behind politeness. She saw none. He waited, hands relaxed at his sides, the dog sitting quietly near his boots. Noah looked up at her. "Mom," he said softly, then glanced at Duke. "Can the dog come too?" Jack huffed a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "He doesn't go anywhere without me," he said, "and I don't leave him in the cold." Sarah exhaled slowly. The cold was seeping into her bones, and Noah's shivers had become harder to ignore. "Okay," she said at last. The word felt heavy and light at the same time. "Just for a little while." Jack nodded once. "That's fine." He rolled the motorcycle closer, steadying it with one foot. Duke hopped back onto the rear frame with practiced ease. Jack handed Sarah an extra helmet, its padding worn but clean. "For him," he said, indicating Noah. "I'll take it slow." Sarah helped Noah put it on, adjusting the strap beneath his chin. The helmet slipped slightly over his eyes, and he laughed, the sound brief but real. It was the first laugh Sarah had heard from him that night. She climbed on behind Jack, holding Noah between them, careful not to press too close. Jack started the engine, its low rumble steady and controlled, and eased the bike into the street. They did not go far. The ride took less than 10 minutes, winding through quieter blocks where houses gave way to small industrial buildings and closed shops. The repair shop sat at the end of a narrow alley, its sign unlit, the metal door pulled down for the night. Behind it stood a separate structure, a squat concrete building with a slanted roof and a single small window glowing faintly. Jack parked beside it and cut the engine. "This is it," he said. The garage did not look inviting at first glance. The concrete walls were stained from years of work, and the paint on the door was chipped. A light above the entrance buzzed softly, casting a yellow circle onto the snow-covered ground. Jack unlocked the door and pushed it open. Warm air spilled out, carrying the smell of oil, metal, and something faintly sweet, coffee, maybe, or cocoa. Inside, the space was larger than Sarah expected. One half was taken up by workbenches, shelves lined with tools, and a motorcycle lift. The other half had been made into living quarters with practical care. A small electric heater hummed in the corner. A narrow bed sat against the wall, its blanket neatly folded. A folding table held a kettle, mugs, and a stack of canned food. The floor was clean, swept clear of debris. Jack stepped aside. "You can sit there," he said, gesturing toward a padded bench near the heater. "I'll get the heat turned up." Duke jumped down and circled the room once before settling near the door, lying with his head on his paws, eyes alert but calm. Noah took off the helmet and stared around the space, his curiosity slowly overtaking his caution. "Is this where you live?" he asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah." "By yourself?" "Mostly." Noah thought about that, then nodded as if it made sense. Sarah helped him out of his jacket and gloves, rubbing his hands to warm them. She felt the heat of the room soak into her own skin, loosening muscles she had not realized were clenched. Jack filled the kettle and set it on the hot plate. "I've got cocoa," he said, holding up a tin. "And soup, nothing fancy." "That's more than enough," Sarah said. She sat on the bench, pulling Noah close again, though she noticed he leaned slightly toward the heater now, his body relaxing. While the water heated, Jack moved with quiet efficiency, pulling out extra blankets from a storage bin and laying them on the bed. He worked without commentary, as if this were a routine he had practiced before. Sarah watched him, noting the care he took with simple things, the way he smoothed the blanket, the way he checked the heater's setting twice. "You don't have to do all this," she said. Jack shrugged. "I know." The kettle clicked off. Jack poured hot water into mugs and stirred in cocoa powder, handing one to Sarah and another to Noah. The mugs were mismatched, chipped at the edges, but clean. Noah took a cautious sip, then another, his eyes widening. "It's good," he said. Jack nodded. "Told you." Sarah wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth sink in. She had not realized how cold she had been until now. The garage was quiet, except for the heater's hum and the soft scrape of snow sliding off the roof. For a moment, no one spoke. Sarah broke the silence. "My name's Sarah," she said. "This is Noah." Jack inclined his head. "Good to meet you." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for stopping. You didn't have to." Jack leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. Up close, Sarah could see the lines etched into his face, the way his eyes carried a weight that had nothing to do with tonight alone. "I know," he said simply. Noah finished his cocoa and yawned, the sound sudden and deep. Sarah smiled despite herself. "Guess it's been a long night." Jack gestured toward the bed. "He can. Sleep there. I'll take the bench." "No, I couldn't." "It's fine," Jack interrupted gently. "Bench is comfortable enough." Sarah looked at him, then at Noah, who was already leaning toward the bed, eyelids drooping. She helped him climb up, pulling off his boots and tucking the blanket around him. Duke lifted his head and watched, then stood and moved closer, settling near the foot of the bed. Noah reached out and rested his hand on the dog's back. Duke did not move. Sarah turned back to Jack. "He likes dogs," she said unnecessarily. Jack's expression softened. "Duke likes kids." Sarah sat back down on the bench, sipping the last of her cocoa. The room felt safe in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. She was aware suddenly of how exhausted she was, not just from tonight, but from months, maybe years, of carrying tension like a second skin. Jack spoke again, his voice quiet. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said, "but if you want to, I'll listen." Sarah stared into her mug. She thought of the words she had practiced saying and never said, the explanations she had rehearsed in her head. She thought of Noah sleeping a few feet away, his breathing even. "We left because things weren't okay," she said. She chose each word carefully. "We needed space, time." Jack nodded. He did not press. "I don't know what comes next," she continued. "I just knew we couldn't stay." "That's enough for tonight," Jack said. "Tomorrow can figure itself out." Sarah let out a breath she had been holding. She nodded. "Tomorrow," she echoed. Jack checked the heater one last time, then dimmed the overhead light, leaving only the small lamp by the bench on. He lay down, pulling a blanket over himself, his boots placed neatly beneath the bench. Duke shifted slightly, positioning himself so he could see both the door and the bed. Sarah leaned back against the wall, listening to the quiet. Outside, the wind howled briefly, then moved on. Inside, the garage held steady. She did not sleep right away. She watched Noah, watched Duke, and finally let her eyes close, trusting that if something changed, she would know. Jack lay still, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the many nights he had spent in this garage alone, the way the space had been enough for one person, but felt different new, fuller. He did not know what the morning would bring. He only knew that tonight no one would be turned away. The snow continued to fall, piling softly against the walls of the garage, covering the alley in white. Christmas lights blinked somewhere beyond the shop, unseen but present. Inside the garage behind the repair shop, 3 strangers and 1 dog shared warmth, silence, and the fragile beginning of something safer. Morning came slowly to the garage behind the shop. It did not arrive with bells or music or the excitement Sarah remembered from past Christmas mornings. Instead, it crept in through the small window near the ceiling, a pale gray light filtered through frost and dust. The heater still hummed, steady and reliable, and the air smelled faintly of oil, warm fabric, and cocoa from the night before. Snow pressed softly against the outside walls, muting the sounds of the alley beyond. Sarah woke before Noah. She had slept sitting up against the wall, the blanket pulled around her shoulders, her body half expecting to be jolted awake by a sound that never came. For a few seconds, she did not remember where she was. Then she saw the workbench, the shelves of tools, the motorcycle parts lined neatly along the wall. She heard Duke's slow breathing nearby and felt the unfamiliar calm settle in her chest. Jack was already awake. He sat at the folding table, a mug of black coffee in his hands, his posture relaxed but alert. He wore the same work shirt as the night before, sleeves rolled up, tattoos exposed, the leather jacket draped over the back of a chair. He looked up when he noticed Sarah stir. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," she replied, her voice rough from sleep. She shifted carefully, testing her stiff muscles, then glanced at Noah. He slept on his side, one hand tangled in Duke's fur. The dog lay still, eyes open, watching the room without moving. Sarah smiled despite herself. "He didn't move all night," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Duke's like that." Jack stood and poured water into the kettle. "I've got oatmeal," he said. "Plain, but it does the job." "That's perfect," Sarah said. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you, again." Jack shrugged lightly. "You're here, that's all." While the water heated, Sarah took a moment to look around the garage more carefully. In the quiet daylight, she noticed small details she had missed before. A faded photograph taped to the side of a locker showed Jack younger, standing beside a motorcycle much newer than the one outside. Another photo showed Duke as a puppy, all oversized paws and alert ears. The space was sparse but intentional, shaped by someone who valued usefulness over comfort, but cared enough to keep things clean and orderly. Noah stirred as the smell of oatmeal filled the air. He sat up slowly, blinking. "Is it morning?" he asked. "It is," Sarah said. "How did you sleep?" Noah stretched and nodded. "Good." He patted Duke's head. He didn't let the bad dreams come. Jack glanced over at that. He did not say anything, but the muscles in his jaw shifted slightly. They ate quietly. Noah talked about the snow, about how quiet everything sounded, about how Duke reminded him of a dog he had seen in a movie once. Jack listened, answering when spoken to, letting the boy fill the space with small observations. Sarah watched them, noting how Jack never talked down to Noah, never rushed him. It was a kind of respect she had not seen often. After breakfast, Jack pulled on his jacket and boots. "I need to open the shop," he said. "I'll be right out front." He paused, then added, "You're okay here." Sarah nodded. She did not ask how long he would be gone. The idea of being left alone still made her uneasy, but the garage felt different in daylight. It felt solid. Jack stepped outside, Duke rising immediately and following him to the door. Jack rested a hand briefly on the dog's head. "Stay," he said. Duke hesitated, then sat, watching the door close. Sarah stood and began folding the blankets, unsure what else to do. She needed to stay useful. That instinct was hard to quiet. As she worked, her gaze drifted to the window again. Outside, she could see part of the alley and the side street beyond. A pickup truck drove past slowly, tires crunching on snow, then disappeared around the corner. Noah climbed down from the bed and wandered over to the workbench, studying the tools. "Does he fix everything?" he asked. "Almost everything," Sarah said. "Can he fix people?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She knelt beside Noah. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "But mostly, people fix themselves, with a little help." Noah considered that, then nodded. "Okay." The garage door rattled briefly as the wind picked up outside. Duke lifted his head, ears pricked, and stood. He moved toward the door, positioning himself between it and Sarah and Noah. He did not bark. He simply watched. Sarah's stomach tightened. "What is it?" she whispered. Duke's tail remained still. After a moment, he relaxed slightly, stepping back but staying close. Whatever he had heard passed, leaving the garage quiet again. Sarah forced herself to breathe evenly. She knew fear could grow in the absence of reason, feeding on old memories. She looked at her phone again. Still no messages. The battery was down to 10% now. She turned it off and slipped it back into her pocket. Mid-morning, Jack returned briefly, bringing with him a rush of cold air and the smell of snow. "You doing all right?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "We're fine." Jack nodded. "There's a diner a couple blocks over. I can take you later if you want something warmer, Or I can bring it back. Sarah hesitated. The thought of stepping back into public spaces made her chest tighten, but she knew she could not hide forever. Maybe later, she said. Jack did not press. He stepped back out, leaving the door unlocked. Time passed in small, careful increments. Sarah talked to Noah, helped him draw pictures on scrap paper Jack had left on the table. Duke lay nearby, occasionally lifting his head to watch the door or the window. Around noon, Sarah noticed movement outside again. This time, it was not just a passing car. A man stood near the corner of the alley, his back to the garage, talking on his phone. She could not see his face clearly, but something about his posture made her heart begin to race. She moved slowly, not wanting to draw attention, and knelt beside Noah. "Hey," she said gently, "why don't you sit with Duke for a bit?" Noah nodded and scooted closer to the dog, who leaned into him instinctively. Sarah watched the man for another moment. He paced, stopped, looked down to the alley, then turned and walked away. She did not know who he was. She did not know why he unsettled her, but the feeling lingered even after he was gone. Jack returned again a short while later, carrying a paper bag. "Soup and sandwiches," he said. He noticed Sarah's expression immediately. "Something wrong?" Sarah hesitated. She did not want to sound paranoid. "I might be imagining things," she said slowly, "but there was someone outside, near the alley. I don't know who." Jack set the bag down and listened without interrupting. "Did he try to come in?" "No." "Did he see you?" "I don't think so." Jack nodded. "All right." He did not dismiss her concern, but he did not alarm her either. "I'll keep an eye out." They ate lunch together. Noah chatted happily, unaware of the tension threading through the adult's words. Duke ate from his bowl near the door, glancing up occasionally as if counting exits. After lunch, Sarah finally spoke the words she had been circling all morning. "We left because my husband—" She stopped, steadying herself. "Because staying wasn't safe." Jack met her gaze. "You don't have to explain." "I know," she said, "but I want to. Not everything. Just enough." She took a breath. "He gambles, he lies, and when things go wrong, he doesn't take it well." She did not say more than that. She did not need to. The weight of it hung in the air without details. Jack nodded once. "I hear you." "I don't want trouble," Sarah continued. "I just want Noah to grow up without being afraid." "That's reasonable," Jack said. She laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. "It shouldn't feel like it is." Jack's eyes flicked briefly toward the door, then back to her. "Sometimes doing the reasonable thing makes the most noise." The afternoon light faded earlier than Sarah expected. Winter days were short, and the gray outside deepened into blue. Jack turned on the overhead light again, and the garage settled back into its nighttime rhythm. Snow continued to fall, quieter now, as if the city were wrapping itself tighter. As evening approached, Sarah felt the exhaustion return, heavier than before. She had spent so long being alert that letting down her guard, even slightly, left her drained. She watched Noah color, Duke's head resting on his knee, and felt a fragile sense of something like relief. Jack checked his watch. "I'll close up soon," he said. "We'll be locked in for the night." Sir nodded. "Thank you for everything." Jack looked at her for a long moment. "You're safe here tonight," he said. "That's all that matters." Outside, somewhere beyond the garage walls, a car door slammed. Duke lifted his head again, ears forward, body tense. Jack moved toward the door, listening. The sound did not repeat. After a moment, Duke settled back down. Sarah watched the exchange, understanding now what Duke was to Jack. Not just a dog, but a warning system, a promise. She pulled the blanket tighter around Noah as he began to doze again. Night settled in fully, dark and quiet. The garage behind the shop held its small circle of light, its thin walls standing between the people inside and whatever waited beyond them. Sarah knew they could not stay hidden forever. She knew tomorrow would bring decisions she was not ready to make. But for now, with Duke watching the door and Jack nearby, she allowed herself to rest. Christmas lights blinked faintly somewhere down the street, unseen but persistent. Inside the garage, safety was not guaranteed, but it was real, and for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The evening came down early again, folding the day into night with little ceremony. Snow had stopped, but the cold had settled deeper, pressing against the thin walls of the garage like a held breath. Jack finished closing the shop just after 6, pulling the metal door down with a controlled rattle and locking it from the inside. The alley went quiet, the kind of quiet that carried sound farther than usual. Inside the garage, the heater hummed, steady and uncomplaining. Sarah was helping Noah stack paper cups into a small pyramid on the folding table. It was a game she had invented to keep his hands busy and his mind calm. Duke lay nearby, chin on his paws, watching them with relaxed eyes. The lamp by the bench cast a warm circle of light that did not quite reach the corners of the room, but it was enough. Jack checked the lock on the side door, then leaned against the workbench. "You all right?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, just tired." Noah looked up. "Is it bedtime?" "Soon," Sarah said. She smiled, but the word carried weight. Bedtime meant quiet, and quiet made room for thoughts she had spent years pushing aside. Jack reached for a pot and set it on the hot plate. "The soup's on," he said. "I'll keep it simple." As the soup warmed, Duke's ears flicked once. He did not move. Sarah noticed anyway. She had started to learn his language, the small shifts that meant something had changed. She followed his gaze to the window. The alley looked the same as it always had. Snow piled along the edges, the dim light above the door buzzing faintly. Nothing moved. "Probably nothing," Jack said, noticing where she was looking. "Wind carries sound weird in this cold." Sarah nodded, though the tightness in her chest lingered. She tried to let it go. They ate in relative quiet, Noah talking about the shapes he saw in the snow earlier, about how Duke's tail made a thumping sound when he wagged it against the floor. Jack listened, adding a comment now and then. Sarah watched the way Jack kept his voice even, his body relaxed, as if calm were something he could choose and keep. After dinner, Noah brushed his teeth in the small sink near the back wall, standing on a crate Jack had set there earlier. Sarah folded blankets and straightened the bed, grateful for the ordinary tasks. When Noah crawled under the covers, Duke rose and circled once before settling near the foot of the bed again. Jack dimmed the lights. "I'll be up front," he said, "if you need anything." Sarah sat on the bench, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She watched Noah's breathing slow, felt her own muscles begin to release. For a few minutes, she allowed herself to believe the night would pass quietly. The knock came softly. Then again, firmer. 3 taps against metal, not loud, but unmistakable. Duke was on his feet instantly. He did not bark. He moved to the door and stood, body aligned, ears forward, tail still. Jack straightened. From the workbench, his movements controlled. He held up a hand towards Sarah, a small gesture meant to say, "Stay. Stay here," he said quietly. Sarah's heart pounded. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself and Noah, though the boy did not stir. She watched Jack cross the garage, his boots silent on the concrete. He stopped just short of the door. "Yeah?" Jack called through the metal. A voice answered, calm and professional. "Evening. Police department. We're here to check on a report." Jack did not open the door right away. "What kind of report?" he asked. "Welfare check," the voice said. "We'd like to speak with you." Jack glanced back towards Sarah. Their eyes met. He nodded once, as if to reassure her, then unlocked the door and opened it a few inches. 2 officers stood outside, their breath visible in the cold air. One was a woman in her 40s, with her hair pulled back beneath her cap, her posture relaxed but attentive. The other was a younger man, his expression neutral, their hands rested away from their belts. "Evening," the woman said. "I'm Officer Martinez. This is Officer Collins." She glanced past Jack, her eyes taking in the garage interior without lingering. "We received a call expressing concern about a woman and a child possibly being here against their will." Jack kept his voice steady. "They're here by choice." "All right," Officer Martinez said. "We just need to confirm that." Jack stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in." The officers entered, boots crunching lightly on the concrete. Duke remained still, watching them closely. Officer Collins glanced at the dog, then back at Jack. "He friendly?" "He is," Jack said. "And he listens." Officer Martinez nodded appreciatively. Her gaze shifted to Sarah, who had stood up now, keeping one hand on Noah's shoulder. "Ma'am," she said gently, "I'm Officer Martinez. We're just here to make sure everyone's okay." Sarah swallowed. Her mouth felt dry. She took a breath and spoke clearly. "I'm okay. My son's okay. We're here because we want to be." "Is anyone forcing you to stay?" Officer Martinez asked. "No," Sarah said. "No one. Can you tell me your name?" Sarah Bennett. And your son? Noah. Officer Martinez nodded. Thank you. She glanced at Jack. Do you mind if we speak with her privately for a moment? Jack did not hesitate. Not at all. He stepped back toward the workbench, giving them space. Officer Martinez moved closer to Sarah, lowering her voice. Sarah, the call we received claimed you and your child were taken without consent. I need to ask you directly. Are you safe here? Sarah felt her hands tremble, but she steadied them against the bench. Yes. We left home. We came here because we needed somewhere warm and quiet. Officer Martinez studied her face, not searching for fear so much as listening for truth. Is the person who called someone you know? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. My husband. Officer Martinez's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. All right, she said. Thank you for telling me. Officer Collins spoke up from near the door. We'll need to note that you're here voluntarily. That's fine, Sarah said. Jack remained silent, his presence steady but unobtrusive. Duke shifted slightly, then settled again, eyes still on the officers. Officer Martinez finished writing in her notebook. I want to be clear, she said. At this moment, we're not seeing anything that suggests you're being held here. That said, if you feel unsafe at any point, you can contact us. Sarah nodded. I understand. Officer Martinez turned to Jack. Sir, we may follow up if there are further reports. For now, you're not in any trouble. Jack nodded. I figured. The officers moved toward the door. Before leaving, Officer Martinez paused. Sarah, she said, if you'd like, I can give you information about local support services. Completely optional. Sarah's eyes filled unexpectedly. She nodded. Yes, I'd like that. Officer Martinez handed her a small card. Anytime. When the door closed behind them, the garage felt different, not unsafe but charged, as if the walls had absorbed the moment. Jack waited a beat, then exhaled slowly. You okay? He asked. Sarah nodded, though her knees felt weak. She sat down heavily on the bench. He found us, she said quietly. Jack leaned against the workbench again. Looks like it. I didn't think he would, she said. Not this fast. Jack did not argue with her feelings. Sometimes people notice when control slips, he said. Doesn't mean he gets it back. Sarah pressed the card into her palm, grounding herself in its edges. I didn't tell them everything, she said. You told them what mattered tonight, Jack replied. Noah stirred, rubbing his eyes. Mom, he murmured. Sarah moved to him instantly, brushing his hair back. I'm here, she said. Who was that? Just people checking in, she said gently. Everything's okay. Noah nodded sleepily. Duke scared them away, he said, already drifting again. Jack almost smiled. The rest of the night passed quietly, but sleep did not come easily for Sarah. She lay awake, listening to the heater, to Duke's steady breathing, to the faint sounds of the city beyond the garage. She knew the knock meant something had shifted. The outside world had noticed them. Jack stayed up later than usual, sitting at the table, with a mug of coffee, gone cold. He thought about the call that had brought the officers, about the ease with which assumptions were made, and about how fragile safety could be when built quietly. He also thought about the way Sarah had spoken, steady despite her fear. Near midnight, snow began to fall again, lighter this time. Jack stood and checked the door one last time, then turned off the remaining light. Duke lifted his head briefly, then settled back down. In the dim glow of the heater, the garage held its occupants close. They were not hidden anymore. They were not in danger yet. But the air had changed, and all of them felt it. Tomorrow would bring questions. For now, there was only the night, and the choice to face whatever came next together. The morning after the welfare check arrived without snow, but the cold felt sharper for it. The sky was a hard, pale blue, the kind that made every sound carry farther. Inside the garage, the heater hummed as it always did, but the sense of quiet safety had shifted. It wasn't gone. It had simply become aware of itself. Sarah woke early again. She lay still for a moment, listening. Noah slept soundly, his face turned toward the wall, Duke's back pressed gently against his legs. Jack's side of the room was empty. The bench was folded away, the mug rinsed and set upside down. Through the thin wall, she could hear the distant rattle of the shop door being lifted. She sat up slowly and pulled on her sweater. The card Officer Martinez had given her lay on the table where she had placed it the night before, its white edges catching the light. She picked it up, read the printed names and numbers again, then set it back down. The words from last night replayed in her mind, not the officer's questions, but the realization beneath them. Someone had decided to tell a story about her, and once told, stories rarely stayed quiet. Noah woke a few minutes later, cheerful and hungry. Sarah warmed oatmeal, adding the last spoonful of brown sugar. She tried to keep her movements steady, her voice light. Children noticed tension the way they noticed weather, without needing it explained. Jack returned with a paper bag from the diner. "Eggs and toast," he said. "They threw in extra." "Thank you," Sarah said. She watched his face carefully. He looked the same as always, calm, practical, but his eyes moved more than usual, checking the door, the window. As they ate, Jack spoke. "The officers might come back," he said evenly. "Or someone else might ask questions." Sarah nodded. "I figured." I talked to a friend," Jack continued. "She works with a community legal clinic. Not law enforcement, just advice." He paused, letting the words land. "No obligation." Sarah set her fork down. The idea of involving anyone else made her chest tighten, but she knew this was not something she could manage alone. "I'd like to talk to them," she said. Jack nodded. "I'll set it up." Late morning brought a knock that was lighter than the night before. Jack opened the door to a woman in her 50s wearing a thick scarf and sensible boots. She introduced herself as Elaine Porter, a legal advocate with the community clinic. Her hair was gray and cut short, her voice calm and unhurried. She did not carry a briefcase, she carried a notebook. Elaine sat at the folding table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. "I'm here to listen," she said, "and to explain options, nothing more." Sarah told her the same careful version she had told Jack, about leaving, about needing space, about fear without details. Elaine did not interrupt. She nodded occasionally, wrote a few notes. "When someone files a report claiming kidnapping," Elaine said when Sarah finished, "the first step is always verification. That's what happened last night. If the person continues to push the claim, it can become a bigger issue, especially if they frame it as concern." Sarah swallowed. "He knows how to sound convincing." Elaine met her gaze. "Most people who do." "What happens next?" Sarah asked. "Next," Elaine said, "we make sure the truth is documented, calmly, in order." Jack leaned against the workbench, listening. Duke lay at his feet, head up. Elaine explained what documentation meant. Messages saved, dates noted, medical visits remembered, people who had seen things willing to speak if asked. No one needed to rush, no one needed to confront anyone. The process was slow by design. "I don't want to make this worse," Sarah said. Elaine smiled gently. "You didn't. Someone else did." By afternoon, the city seemed to know something was happening, even if it didn't know what. A patrol car passed the alley twice. Once a neighbor from 2 doors down, a man named Rick, who ran an upholstery shop, paused and looked toward the garage longer than usual. He lifted a hand in a brief wave when Jack stepped outside, then walked on. "People talk," Jack said later. "They always do." Sarah felt the weight of that. She had lived quietly for so long that the idea of being noticed felt dangerous. The call came just after 3. Jack's phone buzzed on the workbench. He listened, his face unreadable, then handed the phone to Sarah. "It's the department," he said. "They want to speak with you." Sarah took the phone, her hand steady despite the rush of heat in her ears. Officer Martinez's voice came through, professional and calm. She explained that a formal statement had been filed alleging unlawful restraint. There would be follow-up questions, possibly a scheduled interview. "I understand," Sarah said. "I'm willing to speak." "That's helpful," Officer Martinez replied. "We'll do this properly." After the call ended, the garage felt smaller. Noah sat at the table coloring, unaware. Duke watched the door, tail thumping once when Jack returned the phone to his pocket. "They're making it official," Sarah said quietly. "They are," Jack agreed. "Which means we keep doing what we're doing." Elaine returned in the early evening with a folder. Inside were blank forms, checklists, a timeline template. "Start where you remember," she said. "You don't have to fill it all out tonight." As Sarah wrote, small memories surfaced. Dates of missed work, excuses given, the first time she slept lightly. She did not write feelings. She wrote facts. It steadied her. The next day brought noise, not shouting, not crowds, but attention. A local social media page posted a vague message about a child possibly taken by a biker from an industrial area. No names, no details, but enough to stir curiosity. Jack saw it on his phone and set it face down. "It's not official," he said, "and it won't stay vague if it's wrong." Sarah felt shame rise in her throat, unearned and sharp. "People think things," she said. "They think what they're told," Jack replied, "and then they think something else when the truth shows up." That afternoon, Officer Martinez arrived again, this time with a clipboard and a camera. She asked permission to speak with Sarah privately and to document visible information. Sarah agreed. The process was clinical, respectful, no raised voices, no assumptions. Jack stayed near the door. Duke sat beside him, still. Officer Martinez thanked Sarah for her cooperation. "We'll be in touch," she said. "In the meantime, please keep records of any contact." That night, as Sarah tucked Noah into bed, he asked, "Why do people keep checking on us?" Sarah paused. She chose her words carefully. "Because sometimes grown-ups tell stories when they're scared," she said. "And other grown-ups have to listen to all the stories to know which ones are true." Noah thought about that. "Are we in trouble?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "We're safe." Duke pressed his head into Noah's side, as if to agree. Jack closed the shop and dimmed the lights. Outside, the alley was quiet again, but it felt watched, not by people, but by possibility. He sat at the table with Sarah after Noah fell asleep. "It's going to get louder before it gets quiet," he said. Sarah nodded. "I know." She looked at the folder Elaine had left, the neat stack of papers filled with her handwriting. For the first time, the noise outside did not feel like a wave about to knock her over. It felt like something she could stand against, with time. Snow began to fall again, slow and deliberate. Christmas lights blinked somewhere beyond the shop, indifferent to rumor and fear. Inside the garage, truth was being written down, one line at a time, waiting its turn. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, quiet and unremarkable on their own, the way winter light filled the garage one thin layer at a time. The morning was clear but bitter, the kind of cold that made metal ache and breath hang heavy in the air. Jack opened the shop early, his movements practiced and steady. Inside the garage, Sarah sat at the folding table with Elaine Porter, the legal advocate, spreading papers into neat stacks. Elaine had returned with a different energy than before. Still calm, still careful, but focused now in a way that suggested direction. "We're not chasing anything," she said. "We're organizing." Sarah nodded. She felt tired in a deeper way than before, the fatigue of paying attention. But there was something else too, an unfamiliar sense of footing. The folder in front of her held copies of messages, dates written in her handwriting, appointment slips she had saved without knowing why. They were ordinary things. That was their strength. Elaine pointed to a timeline Sarah had filled in the night before. "This," she said, tapping the page lightly, "already answers a few questions." "What questions?" Sarah asked. Elaine smiled slightly. "Questions about motive, about timing, about why someone would call something a kidnapping days after a person left on their own." Jack listened from the workbench, Duke lying at his feet. He did not comment. He did not need to. He had learned long ago that pressure made people talk more than arguments did. Later that morning, Officer Martinez arrived again, this time alone. She carried a slim case and a tablet. Her demeanor was unchanged, professional, unhurried. She greeted Jack with a nod, then turned to Sarah. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. "Of course," Sarah replied. They sat at the table. Officer Martinez asked questions that were precise and limited. Where had Sarah been the night she left? Who had seen her after? Had anyone restricted her movement? Each answer was brief. Each answer matched the timeline Elaine had helped Sarah prepare. At one point, Officer Martinez paused and glanced at her tablet. "The report we received stated that you were taken from your residence late in the evening," she said, "but your phone records indicate you left earlier, on foot, with your child." Sarah nodded. "That's correct. And the reporting party claimed he attempted to contact you repeatedly that night." Sarah's throat tightened. "He did not," she said. "There were no calls." Officer Martinez nodded again, as if checking a box that had already been marked. "That's consistent with what we're seeing." Jack watched the exchange with quiet attention. Duke shifted, then settled again. After the officer left, Elaine gathered her notes. "This is what consistency looks like," she said. "It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." Elaine smiled gently. That feeling doesn't go away all at once, but it loses power. The next few days followed a pattern. Interviews were scheduled and kept. Paperwork moved from one office to another. A neighbor from Sarah's old building, a woman named Linda Cho, who lived across the hall and worked nights, agreed to speak with authorities about what she had overheard in the weeks before Sarah left. Linda's account was factual and restrained. She described raised voices, doors closing, Sarah's exhaustion. She did not embellish. She did not speculate. At the same time, the story that had grown online began to change shape. Comments shifted from certainty to questions. Someone asked why there were no images, no immediate alerts. Someone else noted that the so-called kidnapper had cooperated fully from the start. The post did not disappear, but it lost its momentum, like a rumor running out of oxygen. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the garage addressed to Sarah. It was official, stamped, heavy in her hands. Jack stood nearby as she opened it. Her eyes moved across the page, then back again. "It says they're reviewing the initial report," she said, "for accuracy." Jack nodded. That's what happens when stories don't line up. That evening, Noah asked why people kept coming by to talk. Sarah answered honestly, but simply. "Because they're figuring things out," she said. "And because telling the truth sometimes takes a little longer than telling a lie." Noah accepted that, as children often do, and returned to his drawing. He had begun to draw the garage now, its door, the motorcycle, Duke sitting in front like a statue. Sarah noticed that in every picture, Duke was between the door and the people inside. Jack noticed too. On the fourth day, Officer Martinez returned with a colleague from a different department. This time, they spoke with Jack as well. They asked about the night Sarah and Noah arrived, about his actions, about the space itself. Jack answered plainly. He described the cold, the bus shelter, the decision to offer warmth. He did not dramatize. He did not defend himself beyond the facts. "Did you restrict their ability to leave?" the other officer asked. "No," Jack said. "The door was unlocked. Did you ask for anything in return?" "No." Officer Martinez wrote something down. "Thank you," she said. "That's all we need." After they left, Jack sat down heavily on the bench. Sarah noticed the tension finally easing from his shoulders. "You okay?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah, just tired." "So am I," Sarah said. She hesitated, then added, "I don't think I said this yet, but I'm glad you were there that night." Jack looked at her for a moment, then looked away. "I was just passing through," he said. "That's not how it feels," Sarah replied. The shift became unmistakable near the end of the week. Elaine called with news. "They have identified discrepancies in the report," she said, "specifically statements that don't match records." Sarah closed her eyes. She felt something inside her loosen, just a little. "What does that mean?" "It means the focus changes," Elaine said, "from you to the report itself." The next day, Officer Martinez arrived with a different tone. Not warmer, not colder, just resolved. "We need to ask you a few more questions," she told Sarah, "about previous interactions, about documentation." Sarah answered. She showed them the old appointment notes, the saved messages, the small pieces she had once thought insignificant. The officers thanked her and left. That night, Jack found Sarah sitting alone at the table, staring at the papers. "You don't have to keep reading them," he said. "I know," she said. "I just want to understand how something so wrong can sound so right to people." Jack considered that. "Because it fits a picture they already have," he said. "And pictures are easier than facts." Sarah nodded slowly. A patrol car drove past the alley, then another, not urgent, not watchful, just present. The garage felt quieter, less like a hiding place and more like a waiting room. On Friday afternoon, a call came through. Elaine's voice was steady. "They're moving forward," she said. "Not against you." Sarah felt the words settle. "Against?" "Against the false report," Elaine finished. Sarah thanked her and ended the call. She sat for a long moment, letting the heater's hum fill the space. When she looked up, Jack was watching her. "They figured it out," she said. Jack nodded once. "I thought they would." Noah ran over then, waving a piece of paper. "Look," he said. "I drew Duke again." Duke lifted his head, tail thumping softly. Sarah smiled. She realized that the fear she had carried so tightly was no longer the loudest thing in the room. It was still there, but it had been pushed aside by process, by patience, by the slow work of truth. That night, as snow fell lightly again, Sarah slept through without waking. Jack sat at the table a while longer than usual, thinking about how easily stories could twist and how hard it was to untwist them. Duke slept with one ear open. The truth, Jack knew, had a shape. Had a maze shape. It was not dramatic. It did not demand attention. It waited. And now, it was being seen. The garage felt different once the pressure lifted. Not suddenly lighter, not empty of worry, but steadier, like a structure that had been reinforced where it mattered most. Morning came with low clouds and a dull sky that hinted at more snow later, but the air inside was warm enough that Sarah no longer kept her coat on. She moved more freely now, her steps quieter, less careful. The heater still hummed, Duke still watched the door, and Jack still opened the shop at the same hour, but the days no longer felt like borrowed time. The call came just after 9. Elaine Porter's name lit up Sarah's phone, and Sarah took a breath before answering. Elaine's voice was calm, measured, the way it had been from the beginning. "They've made a determination," she said. "The report filed against you has been classified as knowingly false. That changes things." Sarah closed her eyes. The word false landed gently, like something set down rather than thrown. "What happens now?" she asked. "The focus moves fully to accountability," Elaine replied. "You may be asked for one more statement, but the burden is no longer on you to explain your safety. It's on the person who made the claim to explain their actions." Sarah thanked her and ended the call. For a long moment, she sat at the folding table, hands wrapped around her mug, feeling the truth settle into her body in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't relief exactly. It was clarity. Jack noticed the change immediately. "They called," he said. Sarah nodded. "It's official." Jack leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but intent. "Good." The next steps unfolded without drama. Officer Martinez returned later that afternoon, her demeanor professional as always. She explained that charges related to the false report were being pursued, and that there would be court dates and procedures. She did not speculate. She did not promise outcomes. She answered questions directly and left printed information behind. Before she left, she looked at Sarah. "You handled this the right way," she said. "That matters." Sarah nodded, unsure what to say to praise that felt unfamiliar. After the door closed, she noticed her hands were no longer shaking. That evening, Jack cooked dinner, simple pasta, bread warmed on the hot plate. Noah helped by carrying napkins to the table, his confidence growing in small, visible ways. He talked about school, about how he might like to learn to fix bikes someday. Jack listened, offering a nod or a short reply, never rushing him. After dinner, Sarah spoke the thought she had been carrying all day. "I don't want to stay here forever," she said. She watched Jack's face carefully, afraid of seeming ungrateful. Jack nodded. "I wouldn't want you to." "I mean," she continued, "I'm grateful, more than I can say. But I want Noah to have a place that's ours." "That's the idea," Jack said. Simply, they talked then, not about fear or accusations, but about practical things. Work, rent, school schedules. Jack mentioned a small apartment building 2 blocks from the diner, old but well kept. He did not offer to pay. He did not frame it as rescue. He spoke in options. "I can make some calls," he said. "No pressure." Sarah nodded. "I'd like that." The following days were filled with movement. Elaine helped Sarah apply for temporary housing assistance, explaining each form without judgment. A caseworker from the community office, a soft-spoken woman named Martha Reynolds with wire-rimmed glasses and a stack of folders, visited the garage to meet Sarah and Noah. Martha asked questions about needs and timelines, about work history and child care. She spoke with care, treating Sarah like a participant rather than a problem. Noah liked Martha immediately. "She smells like cookies," he whispered to Sarah after she left. Jack took Noah to the diner one morning, while Sarah met with Martha again. Duke stayed with Sarah, lying near the door as always. Sarah noticed how Duke's presence grounded her now. At first, he had been a comfort because he was watchful. Now, he was a comfort because he stayed. News traveled back through official channels, not rumors. Elaine called again with updates. A court date had been set. The false report was no longer a story circulating online. It was a file with a number, a process with steps. The noise had lost its edge. One afternoon, Sarah received a message from a number she recognized and immediately muted. She did not open it. She showed it to Elaine instead, who documented it and added it to the growing record. "You're doing exactly what you should," Elaine said. That night, Sarah lay awake longer than usual. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar quiet that followed it. She thought about how much of her life had been shaped by anticipating someone else's reactions. She thought about how different it felt to let systems, slow and imperfect as they were, do their work. Jack noticed her restlessness the next morning. "You don't have to be ready all at once," he said. "I know," she replied. "It's just strange. Strange is normal after loud things stop," Jack said. As the week went on, tangible signs of change appeared. Sarah interviewed for a steady morning shift at the diner. The manager, a woman named Carol Whitman with practical shoes and a no-nonsense manner, reviewed Sarah's experience and nodded. "We can start you Monday," she said. "Hours are early, pay's not fancy, but it's solid." "That's perfect," Sarah said. Noah visited the nearby public school with a counselor who showed him the classroom and playground. He came back to the garage with flushed cheeks and excitement. "They have a reading corner," he announced, "and a fish." Jack smiled at that. The apartment viewing happened on a gray afternoon. The building was old brick, the Zoll. Hallway clean, the unit small but bright. 2 rooms, a kitchen with working appliances, a heater that clicked on reliably. Sarah stood in the doorway and imagined Noah's drawings on the walls, Duke lying in a patch of sunlight. She signed the paperwork with hands that were steady. Back at the garage, Jack helped carry the few things they had accumulated. Bags of donated clothes, school supplies, a set of dishes Elaine had arranged. He did not comment on the size of the boxes or the weight of the moment. That evening, Officer Martinez called once more. "The charges related to the false report are proceeding," she said. "You may be asked to appear, but we'll coordinate through Elaine." Sarah thanked her and ended the call. She sat quietly for a while after, then looked at Jack. "It's happening," she said. Jack nodded. "I know." They did not celebrate. There was nothing to toast yet, but the air between them felt settled, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. On their last night sleeping in the garage, Sarah packed quietly. Noah helped, placing his drawings carefully into a folder. Duke watched, tail thumping now and then, as if he understood the change was not a loss. Jack sat at the table, hands wrapped around his mug. He watched the space that had held them all for weeks. The bench, the heater, the door Duke had guarded. "You'll be okay," he said. Sarah looked up at him. "We are okay," she corrected gently, "because of this." Jack accepted the distinction with a nod. Later, after Noah had fallen asleep for the last time in the garage, Sarah stepped outside with Jack. The air was cold but clear. Snow had begun to fall again, light and deliberate. The shop sign buzzed faintly. "I don't know how to thank you," Sarah said. Jack shook his head. "You already did," he said. "You stayed, you spoke, you moved forward." Sarah smiled, a real one, unburdened. She looked abass at the garage, then at Jack. "I won't forget this place." Jack followed her gaze. "It did its job," he said. Inside, Duke shifted in his sleep, one ear lifted, ready if needed. Outside, the city moved on, quieter now, its attention turned elsewhere. The story that had once grown loud was being replaced by something slower and truer. Tomorrow, Sarah and Noah would leave the garage, not in haste, not in fear, but with plans, keys, and a path forward. The hardest part had not been surviving the noise. It had been trusting that when the noise ended, something solid would remain, and it had. The first morning in the new apartment arrived without ceremony. There were no sirens, no knocks, no phones vibrating on the table. Light came in through the kitchen window and rested on the pale wall, warming it just enough to soften the edges of the room. The heater clicked on and off, reliable and unremarkable. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace, indifferent to how much effort it had taken to reach this quiet. Sarah woke before Noah out of habit, then lay still for a moment and let herself notice where she was. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The room smelled like fresh paint and clean laundry instead of oil and metal. She could hear footsteps from the hallway and the distant sound of a bus stopping on the corner. It was a small apartment, but it was theirs. She got up and made coffee in the narrow kitchen. The mugs they had brought from the garage lined up neatly beside the sink. When Noah patted in, rubbing his eyes, she smiled and poured him milk. He looked around, as if checking that the walls were still there. "This is really our place," he said. "It is," Sarah replied. He grinned wide and unguarded and ran back to his room to retrieve his drawings, taping one to the refrigerator with careful precision. It was a picture of the garage, the motorcycle, and Duke sitting squarely in front of the door. Sarah let it stay there. Their first week settled into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. Sarah started her morning shift at the diner, the smell of coffee and toast marking the beginning of each day. The hours were early, the work steady. Carol Whitman, the manager, treated her like a professional, not a favor. Noah started school, coming home each afternoon with stories about the reading corner and the fish tank. The counselor called once to say he was adjusting well. Jack visited once that first week, riding up on the Harley just after dusk. The bike sounded the same as always, low and steady, but Sarah noticed how different it felt hearing it now, from inside a place that did not feel temporary. Jack removed his helmet and stood in the doorway, Duke sitting calmly at his side. "You settling in?" Jack asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "We are." Noah ran up and hugged Duke around the neck, laughing. Duke endured it patiently, tail wagging. Jack watched them, his expression softening in a way Sarah had learned not to comment on. They sat at the small kitchen table and shared soup Sarah had made, the steam fogging the window. Conversation flowed easily, about school schedules, about a leak in the shop Jack needed to fix, about the weather turning colder again. There was no need to talk about what had happened. It was present without being central. As December wore on, Christmas approached with a gentler pace. The city put up its lights again, and this time Sarah noticed them without the weight of fear pressing behind her eyes. She and Noah decorated a small tree they found at a discount lot, its branches uneven but sturdy. Noah insisted Duke needed a stocking too. Sarah laughed and agreed. One afternoon, Elaine called to say the legal process had concluded. The false report had been addressed, consequences applied, the file closed. "You don't need to do anything else," Elaine said. "Go live." Sarah thanked her and hung up, the words sinking in slowly. She did not feel triumphant. She felt free. On Christmas Eve, the diner stayed open late. Carol put up extra lights and played old carols low through the speakers. Customers lingered, warmed by coffee and conversation. Jack arrived near closing time, his jacket dusted with snow, Duke shaking off flakes at the door. Noah was there, sitting at a small table near the counter, drawing on a napkin. When he saw Jack, he waved enthusiastically. "You came." Jack nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." He reached into his jacket and placed a small box on the table. "This is for you." Noah opened it carefully. Inside was a simple wooden harmonica and a card written in neat block letters. Noah read it aloud, slowly. "For songs that help you breathe easier." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Jack met her gaze briefly, then looked away, as if embarrassed by the attention. Later, when the diner finally closed and the last chairs were stacked, the three of them walked outside together. Snow had begun to fall again, light and quiet. The street was empty, the decorations glowing softly. Jack stopped on the sidewalk and cleared his throat. "I'm not good at speeches," he said, "so I'll keep it short." He looked at Sarah. "You did the hard part. You kept going. I was just around." Sarah shook her head gently. "You were more than around." Jack considered that. "Maybe," he said. "But you chose what came next." Noah tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Your family," he said matter-of-factly. "Right?" Jack blinked, caught off guard. He looked at Sarah, unsure. Sarah smiled. "If you want to be," she said. Jack exhaled slowly, the tension easing from his shoulders. "I'd like that," he said. Duke barked once, softly, as if in agreement. They walked together toward the apartment, Jack's coat draped over Noah's shoulders when the cold bit sharper. Snow gathered on the sidewalk, erasing old footprints as quickly as new ones were made. The city seemed to pause around them, holding the moment gently. Inside the apartment, Sarah set the kettle on the stove and turned on the small lamp by the window. The tree lights blinked on, filling the room with soft color. Noah placed the harmonica on the table beside his drawings and looked up at Jack. "Can you stay?" he asked. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "For a bit." They sat together, listening to the quiet, the distant sounds of the city muffled by falling snow. Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. It was the warmth of knowing where she would wake up the next morning, and the next, and the next. Later, after Jack left and Noah had fallen asleep, Sarah stood by the window alone. Snowflakes drifted past the glass, catching the light. She thought about the garage, about the night on Maple Street, about how fear had once narrowed her world to the size of her breath. She thought about how slowly, patiently, that world had expanded again. Family, she realized, did not arrive all at once. It was built from moments when someone stayed, when someone listened, when someone believed you without asking for proof. It was chosen, not claimed. On the street below, Jack mounted his Harley, Duke hopping onto the back with practiced ease. The engine rumbled to life, then faded into the distance. Sarah smiled and turned off the light. Christmas came quietly that night, not with gifts or noise, but with a sense of place that stayed. Sometimes, miracles don't come as answers. They come as people, a stranger who stops, a door that opens, a truth that finally stands. Maybe that's how God works, quietly placing the right hearts in the right moment, asking us to choose kindness when it matters most. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment if you believe small acts can still change lives. And subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every dark road until you find your way home.